Two, one, and we are live. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Wolf. Happy Wednesday to everybody out there. We're live on stream with Flo. Flo, welcome to the show. He's regular on a lot of our Market Talk spaces and representing Ostium Labs. Let's get it.
Hey guys, good to see everyone. It's about 10:45 here in Southern California. So for the rest of you on the East Coast, it's about getting there into the afternoon hours. Glad to be here. To kind of go over the markets. Talk a little bit with Kate per usual.
Oh yeah, always yapping over here. If you're watching the stream, please do retweet and like the stream, whether you're live or not. It is a recorded stream, so this helps us a ton. And figured we'll dive in a little bit. Flo is regular on a lot of our panels. Usually we have anywhere from 3 to like anywhere as much as 10, 12 speakers in the panel at any given point. So the streams are kind of a cool way to just zoom in to the traders, get a little bit of an inside look on how they look at the markets, the different tools they use, the platforms that they use. We'll do a bit of a deep dive to Ostium as well, because we have Flo here. He's like the perfect person to dive into everything that they've got going on at Ostium. So if you're tuning into the stream, there's a lot to unpack here. So anyways, I'll turn it over to Flo. Flo, also, if you could, before we jump in, like from someone who doesn't know you as well, what kind of trader would you describe yourself as? What kind of experience level are you? Are you taking trades every single day, every week? Like, what kind of trader are you, just so they have some context?
Gotcha. So around 2016, 2017 is actually when I first started trading. My trading style has developed a lot since then. It's changed a lot since then. Right now, I would say I'm mostly focusing on short-term, medium-term momentum. Easiest way to understand that a lot of time is breakout trades, primarily on retest. So not obviously, aping the large green candle like right as we break out, but looking for that retest of key levels and basically, placing very, very, very tight trades there. I usually use high leverage, so pretty dangerous, but anywhere from 20 to oftentimes even 100x. So when we're placing those trades, very, very tight stops, I'm looking, anything like 10 to 20% drawdown, even on 100x is like where I'd kind of take my profits, like, nah, this isn't working. Usually aiming for like anywhere from like 3-1 to like a 5-1 like risk reward ratio. So it's very high stakes, very high leverage. If you were to take a look at like my win percentage, it doesn't look very good. But if you were to look at the skew between wins and losses, profits and losses, that's where I make my money, right?
Okay.
Other than that, I obviously maintain like a long-term portfolio, stuff that I really don't touch very much, except occasionally kind of at just like market extremes for hedging. But yeah, for the most part right now, my active trading, which is, like you said, I mentioned, I put in trades pretty much every day at this point, is just going to be those lower time frame kind of like momentum trades. For example, right now, right, we just had one. We literally just had a perfect setup like that with both on ETH, Bitcoin, Sol, etc., where we saw like a breakout over the weekend on low volume that just got completely smashed, completely retraced yesterday, right? A lot of liquidations just from people FOMOing on that. So I was able to kind of buy the retest of those key levels. So when I'm sharing my screen later, you'll get to see some of those things that I trade off of, right? I was able to catch the around 2,400. I think my average is a little bit above 2,400 on ETH, for example. So that trade is obviously pumping massively. I think we're at 25, above 25.50 right now. So that's been a really, really good trade for me at this point, right?
Oh, dude, that's a sweet trade right there. Glad you got into that one. I was gonna say, if you want to share your screen,
I'm
happy to run through. If you want to if you even want to pull up the ETH chart, actually, might be a good place to start. We actually talked about ETH a little bit in the market talk space a little bit earlier, and people were saying it's very tradable. And we were sort of, because I remember a few months ago, Ethereum was a hot topic because people on one side of the aisle were saying ETH hasn't moved all cycle, it's done for, it's not coming back. And then it bounced a little bit, and then it started to come back, and people were like, wait a minute, hold on, let's look at the fundamentals of Ethereum. All of the stablecoin money and stablecoin liquidity and volume is on Ethereum. It's the home of DeFi.
Right.
Like, ETH will absolutely come back, and now that narrative is starting to come back. So Ethereum is sort of creeping back into the limelight, I feel like, as topic of conversation.
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest with you, not a maxi. I mess around on any chain. I'm fairly chain agnostic when it comes to actual usage. But when it comes to an actual evaluation of the tech, where the roadmaps are heading, how I look at things into, 5, 10, 20 years into the future, um, you know, I guess, my bias is absolutely that ETH is essentially kind of like the future of finance. The future of internet capital markets will primarily happen on Ethereum. Number of reasons, decentralization, security, a lot of things that, if you're just a trader or just kind of like a user, you maybe don't even have to, kind of worry about as much as
Mm.
opposed to someone who's kind of like just like actively like involved in the space itself, like in the actual building out of infrastructure, things like that. But essentially, those are the reasons that, big, large institutions, BlackRock, JP Morgan, banks and kind of like wealth management companies are going to end up going on ETH is for those reasons. And I think it makes sense to align your capital at this point. If the BTC ETFs are any indication, the best way to kind of make money at this point is to align yourself behind those kind of institutional flows, right?
Yeah, they're beginning a ton as well. It's been interesting to. I've been interested to watch like the president's family unload and continue to stack into ETH. I think that's been really interesting to the narrative because there's a point where people were making fun of Vitalik and the ETH Foundation, just making fun of them. They were like the butt of the joke for a little while because ETH just hadn't moved in so long, and people were comparing the last cycle highs to today's prices and just making fun of them. And then people were like, "Man, the Trump family keeps stacking ETH." World Liberty Fi, this big DeFi move is going to be happening on ETH. Eric Trump, is making moves in the Bitcoin mining world and really making moves there and saying, ETH is going to be huge. And so it's pretty interesting. Like it's wild what one cycle will do to a narrative around a company and coin. Like a company and coin could be a real winner, and a few months later just be the butt of the joke.
It's fairly interesting. One of the reasons behind that is I've kind of, I've yapped about this many times, so I won't get too deep into it. But essentially, I look at ETH as like a business cycle asset. Essentially just a very cyclical, almost commodity within the crypto market, or even more specifically within like the DeFi market. So, one thing to note, among that many participants might have noted this cycle is that ETH actually, the DeFi ecosystem has actually been fairly quiet. Most of the attention, during the peak so far of this cycle, the hype cycle was directed towards like meme coins, the Solana ecosystem. And essentially, I mean, if you're really looking at it holistically, it was going through a similar like cyclical kind of period or secular period, similar to ETH last cycle, right? So one of my actually, unpopular theses are at this point is that, because Solana is maturing as a network, so, you have things like Pump Fund, you have, what is it, like Axiom on there, the things that are actually generating real revenues, is that Solana actually will essentially, like what is the way to say it? Just like the value within the Solana ecosystem or the Solana network will start to spread out to apps, spread out to actual apps, actual businesses like Pump Fund, like Axiom, things that are making money. Similarly to you saw with ETH, right? So ETH reached, let's see, I mean, what were the all-time highs? Like the major all-time highs. So I mean, around like 4,800.
Yeah.
I actually remember ETH at 4,800 and like popping bottles, and then that didn't work out very well for me. But is that it's going through a similar cycle to ETH was then. So as the asset matures in kind of like sort of like these interim periods, you see a lot of the value go outwards from the base layer, so outwards from the L1 towards apps. So there's this thing that was called the Fat Protocol thesis back in the day. That's honestly been a disaster for the human race, that essentially just theorized that all the value would go towards the Fat Protocol, so like the base layer. And I think that over time we're kind of seeing that that's not necessarily true if the network matures out of that initial stage, and you actually see like valuable companies, valuable protocols being built on top of it. So maybe that's a little bit too much into the weeds, but yeah, that's like why I think that ETH will now start to be looked at a little bit differently. Because like the other L1, Solana is probably going to go through a very similar period that ETH has over the last like couple years. But
Nice. What other main assets are you trading nowadays? Well, like what are the main
right
assets
now,
you're planning to
so what I'll do, I actually have a watch list set up here on TradingView. You know, obviously we could go here, you know, and look at things directly on the Ostium app. But I'm not going to lie. Obviously, there's still more functionality directly on TradingView. So I execute all of my trades here in the Ostium app. But a lot of time when I'm doing analysis, you know, I want advanced indicators like
Sounds
these
good.
beautiful pink and orange lines here that you cannot get, unfortunately, on like a you know, when you're using the kind of
Not
side
yet.
app, right? So the main things that I trade, just general rules, is going to be obviously BTC, ETH, occasionally Sol. I'll be honest with you, Sol is a little bit harder to trade based off of like my style, just because it's a little bit more volatile. You know, like you're using high leverage, it's just a little bit easier for it. You know, you catch one of those dangerous wicks and just get liquidated. So a little bit less for me. And then into kind of like more traditional assets, like I'm pretty active trading gold, which just tidbit, I'm extremely bullish on still going into the next couple of years.
Really?
4,000 by 2026.
Oh wow.
Yeah, throwing that out there.
Wow.
And then alternatively, I'm actually just fundamentally bearish on oil. I've been shorting oil. You know, we saw like all that drama in the Middle East recently that caused some of these dramatic spikes, and on both of these spikes, I was just like, short that straight into the ground. It looks like it's actually consolidating a little bit. You know, if we're looking at just kind of like a very basic like level here, right? It kind of like is back at or consolidated above like this neckline of this inverse head and shoulders. So yeah, it's actually seeing a little bit of a
Are you
pump now.
long-term bearish on oil or just these like more short-term?
I'm actually, right now fundamentally bearish on oil. Just for a number of reasons. You know, chart kind of aside on this one, you know, it's a little bit, you know, I'm not necessarily looking at pure technicals. Looking at pure technicals, you know, I probably would have said to here like long around this consolidation point for, you know, like a potential pump up to 68. But long term, there's just too many reasons to be bearish on oil. There's somewhat of a supply glut. Demand is fairly cyclically low from China. You know, the Saudis have about I think 3 million barrels of day of excess production that they could turn on at any time, that they are actually talking to like their partners at OPEC Plus about doing. So it's just there's a lot of there may be like very short-term reasons to be bullish on oil, but ultimately just like on a cyclical like fundamental basis, oil is not necessarily the most bullish asset. There's just a lot of excess supply, and at least up until now, demand is somewhat just, you know, kind of tepid, right? It's not very high, especially from China, until they can, you know, stimulate their economy and get things pumping over there again. So,
Wow. What other tools, softwares, like news accounts, like what other assets do you use, I guess, to sort of keep yourself informed?
So I like to keep it very simple, the KISS method, you know, keep it simple, stupid. So as you can tell, like I'm actually very, very basic. So let's go to something where, you know, a more interesting chart again. So looking at, let's remove some of these here. Yeah, that was literally just like looking at like a RSI, like divergence. Obviously, they tend to be somewhat ignored in the short term by Bitcoin. So, I mean, as far as like actual tools, indicators, I'll be quite honest with you, I don't use very much. Like, for example, I'm literally looking at the most basic of indicators, like right here. You know, people like to get really complicated with things. I'm kind of old school, so I'm literally looking at things like RSI, things like, you know, MACD. So like very, very simple stuff. And as far as, you know, like moving averages, you know, most people you'll see they have things like VWAP, you know, the 50, the 7 or 10, the 50, the 200 kind of like moving averages. I actually just use these two like somewhat proprietary like moving averages. This one is actually called Cheeto, and the other one is called Pinky. So there's basically custom indicators that I learned or I actually got from like a old school gold like commodity trader. So like very, very, very long term moving averages that you will tend to see the price reacting. You know, I couldn't give you the exact reasoning, but you tend to see price reacting very strongly. So like looking at ETH, for example, this is legitimately what I place my trade off of. So you can see here, for example, that we were based with that. What tends to happen, actually, let me go back to the long term. What tends to happen is the price somewhat compresses like in between these lines. So like last cycle, you know, this was like my buy and sell points, you know, essentially last cycle until we finally broke out, which is where I got like, we're very long on ETH around here. And so in that same kind of way, you know, looking here, I saw us, you know, dip below, you know, all the way down to this, you know, 2100 level. And then what I was looking for was essentially a reclaim of both of these moving averages. So what we got is a pretty strong move above. And then again, retest here, and just kind of like ranging, right? So my final buy point essentially was, okay, when we get a final touch retest of this here, this, so what we call Cheeto, that's going to be like my final kind of buy point in this range. Anywhere below that, if we were to break below both of these, essentially like both of these MAs, I would have cut and been like, okay, like we're looking at the start of a bearish trend, maybe even new lows below 2200. So I like to keep things very simple, use indicators that I know just from lots of experience looking at the chart that they work, and the key levels are placed oftentimes around them. So for example, here again, like looking at Solana, right? Like you'll see again, what did it do? It retested around the Cheeto line. We didn't make it all the way down here towards Pinky, but again, like this was a good place for me to set my buys and start to, you know, trade towards the next key levels around here. So there is somewhat of a like a vibes, animal spirits level like to my trading. I'll be honest with you, I'm not gonna wow you with a bunch of technical indicators, a bunch of tools. I'm literally looking at candlestick charts, looking at a very small amount of indicators. You know, signal to noise ratio is like, or noise to signal ratio is pretty high on a lot of these things. So really just keeping things very, very simple. Again, analysis on high time, trading on lower time frames. Yeah.
Are there like what's the word I'm looking for? Like resources or news channels or other like places you go to for alpha or for finding out new information or news?
I again like vibes, animal spirits. So I'm actually mostly I have a very curated kind of following, and where's my got all these notifications, right? So maybe, you know, this is something that people in the audience, like if they you can pull these and you'll have like a very, very high like signal to noise ratio following. So these are the people that I actually keep on notifications. So not just I follow these accounts, but I'm looking at like whenever they post, because there's actual bits of alpha and information to actually gather from them. So some of you may be familiar with Fei Zhao. He's the host of the Forward Guidance podcast. Always a lot of alpha, literally of just reading conversations that he has with other market players, like highly recommended. Joe Weisenthal runs the Odd Lots, or is one half of the Odd Lots podcast. Also, you know, good to keep an eye on like what the narrative is, what the actual like it's a good way to read the room. He tends to like be a conduit just for like public sentiment a lot of the time. And yeah, I mean, just a lot of very good, a mix of, I would say, just like narrative accounts, like people who are just like very good at giving you a temperature reading of the room, macro accounts, and actual, you know, traders. Like again, another really good follow. Atlantis, like I said, if you guys are in this room, you know, you guys want a high alpha feed, follow these people, put them on notifications. Yeah, Market Radar, you know, Walter Bloomberg, a few people, there's quite a few people, right? Just start, here we go. Talking about Tesla, you know, that's another thing that can maybe look at here just real quick as an aside. Is that Tesla, right? They actually reported, I think, a miss again on deliveries. So, and what you'll see is, yeah, it's 2 years. I think it's 2 years in a row that year over year, the amount of vehicle deliveries has dropped. So not necessarily bullish for Tesla as the company, but I mean, as you can see here, the market reacted actually positively to the news of like decreased deliveries. And I mean, that's likely Yeah, I mean, it happens. It's likely just because the expectations were already priced lower. The
Mhm.
meme, right, is that it's already priced in.
Yep.
So that seems to be what happened here. And again, just another funny coincidence, right, is that where did it consolidate? Is right around this pinky line, right? So right around that key indicator that I use pretty much for everything. Yeah, I mean, pretty clear. And then where does it start consolidating? Where are you starting to see like a take profit point, right? Right at this beautiful orange line here. So again,
Mm.
I'm not like a type person to over analyze, like over intellectualize trading. Sometimes what you need to do is find just like something that works, find a pattern that you see all the time and that that you'll see again, or you'll know it when you see it again. And you're able to kind of just take that bet. Um, Sometimes that's all it's about, right? Not looking at, we all know, it's not about looking at balance sheets. It's not about looking at fundamentals all the time. It's about looking at positioning, and basically just oftentimes just looking at what the charts have to tell you versus what the kind of like narrative is, right?
Very nice. I saw some people commenting as well. Very Brar saying bullish on Bitcoin. Saucy reposted. Appreciate you, Saucy. Far asks long-term thoughts on Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Whoa.
long term.
All
So
right. Wait, have you? I don't know if you've gone over this before. I don't know if I've ever gotten your actual thesis and like thoughts on the assets, just versus just like price action.
oh god, the fundamentals of Bitcoin essentially, right?
Yes, it seems like
Let
this
me
is the
actually
question.
let me I have something really I mean this, I'll be honest with you, this thesis tends to like upset people.
Oh no! Oh no!
But it's bullish. That's the main thing. It tends to upset people ideologically, but it's
You
actually
believe it was
very
made by the CIA, don't you?
hey, it actually, I mean, I wouldn't say it's impossible that a government agent was actually Satoshi. So like maybe that's like the most
Oh
unpopular thing I'll say here.
wow!
Um,
Wow! Wow! Wow!
but essentially I'm bullish on Bitcoin, right? Because of the fact that the US monetary system works as it does, right? So that's like somewhat contrary to most people's assessment. They're bullish Bitcoin because they think the system's broken, right? So it's like that's like the common kind of thing. If you're in crypto, you
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin is good because the system is broken, the
Yeah,
monetary system isn't working as it should, and that's why things
fix
are
the money.
happening as it fix the money, right? So my thesis is essentially that Bitcoin is bullish because of the way the system works now. And if you were to fix the system in any meaningful way, and kind of like get rid of that excess liquidity in the system, I mean, maybe America wins, like maybe real economies win, but Bitcoin, in my opinion, would not. The way I see it essentially is that Bitcoin is a dollar derivative, just like any other asset or commodity that's priced in dollars, right?
Mm.
So the key thing to remember is that dollars are not actually an asset. Many people get this thing confused and they're like, a dollar is supposed to be an asset. Therefore, when I hold a dollar, it should maintain or grow its value, right? Like that's the whole problem that people have with the fiat system is they're saying, you paid me a dollar. I should be able to hold that dollar forever and its value should maintain, value or possibly even grow value. Like that's how people look at assets, right? The dollar is designed to do the opposite, right? It's not an asset. It is structurally designed to bleed value into assets. So again, things like real estate, stocks, bonds, debt, whatever it may be, the dollar is structurally designed to actually devalue itself, or might say debase itself, to add value to those assets. And that's not a breaking or a dysfunction of how the system works. That's actually the key way that it was designed to work. So I think that if you align yourself behind this ideology and the fact that the system working as intended actually is bullish for Bitcoin, it doesn't really change your stance, right? You're still bullish on Bitcoin, but it actually gives you a much more positive ideology behind it. Is that it's not a counter trade against the United States, it's not a counter trade against the real economy. It's actually a bullish trade, a beta trade, right? That you're taking with the economy, with the growth, and again, like you get to see things not as okay. I'm bullish because the world's breaking. I'm bullish because the world is working as it is intended, and Bitcoin provides an overflow bucket for any excess liquidity that happens to overflow when this is happening. So like I said, a little bit contrarian, but ultimately it leads to the idea of Bitcoin, of being bullish on Bitcoin either way. I actually have some writings on Twitter about this. It's titled, no offense, but how money works for idiots. And it basically the idea is to basically just kind of give people an actual idea of how money works, and the monetary system, how money flows between sovereigns and countries, what debt actually is. And yeah, I mean, we could go into like tons just from that, like one last crackpot thesis. People like to look at the debt to GDP ratio of the United States and try to, make arguments that we're insolvent, or that we can no longer continue to, print the amount of debt or create the amount of debt that we are. My hottest take right now, I think, is that you shouldn't look at debt the way you do now. You should actually look at debt as a product that the United States manufactures and then exports and sells to other countries. So if you look at a product, debt as a product the United States creates, manufactures, exports as a product, and sells it to other countries, which if you actually look at what dollar debt and dollars do in foreign economies, I mean, it's pretty factual. Then the debt to GDP of the United States is actually a lot less than just like, naked calculations of would actually like lead you to believe. So yeah, my bullish thesis on Bitcoin is actually being bullish on America, and I think that's a far cry from a lot of other people's foundation.
Interesting. Yeah, I was gonna say, man, I wonder what would happen if you walked into a Bitcoin maxi space and dropped that in.
Oh, I mean, Bitcoin maxis, ETH, like my thesis on ETH, like and network value and why the price doesn't go up as much anymore is actually like a bullish thing for the Ethereum network. Like I can piss every maxi off in the room, whether there's Solana. I can tell you about how Solana, the price is likely to be less reflexive now because it's a maturing network, and you'll start to see more ETH like price action. I can piss those guys off. Any maxi is just fair game. Like is pretty at this point. So
nobody's safe. Nobody's safe, including these. So it says Saucy reposted the stream. I'm able to pull this up on the screen here. There's these like it's definitely an NFT. It's some kind of like dog thing.
Here's what I was talking about, just real quick. I don't want to reveal my whole portfolio, but yes, this is the average of the ETH trade. So my entry at this point, 2407, still massive. I've closed a few of these already. And yeah, we're up like 650%. I'm trying to make like, so right now, let's go here actually towards leaderboard.
Huge position there. Good job.
So right now, you can see like, it's not by dollar value, but just by percentage. So my goal, I'm trying to make it up here to the top of the leaderboard for best trade. So I'm like halfway there, right? We're looking at 1,000, 1,200%.
Nice.
So that's my current goal. Like I'm literally all inning just to try to beat that record, just because the not rumor, but like the consensus, the joke at this point is that no one can hit that. No one can hit, not over 900% right now, or 1,000%. So that's where I'm at. I'm trying to prove the consensus wrong in multiple ways right now.
Man, wow. Yeah, I love that. By the way, I was going to say on Ostium, what other are there any specific features that are interesting for people? Because I know people who have sat, especially in our spaces, know that you're from Ostium, have heard us talk about Ostium before. They know that you can trade most assets all in one place. It's kind of like the main thing that we've talked about with you guys. But are there any platform features that you think might be interesting to show just while we have it up?
Yeah, I mean, this is still something that we're essentially working on here, like for V2. But I always like to go over this anyways, just because, in my opinion, it was like probably the most exciting part of the product, like, or at least new product that we've released in the last few months. So obviously you can tell that some of these are somewhat outdated, but we are working on like a V2 of this product, where essentially what it allows you to do is the easiest way I like to position it is as an event-based limit order, right? So in this case, we had some presets, that kind of gave you an already existing trade. But the way it generally worked is that you were able to pick essentially a certain market, so a prediction market. Say like, so Trump ending the Iran Israel kind of like conflict. You would be able to set up a trade based on that. So let's say you thought it was going to be bullish. When the war ends for BTC, you could essentially set the ability to long, choose your asset, choose the amount of collateral that you wanted to put up, and the amount of leverage, and essentially choose a probability of this to happen. So the biggest use case that we saw actually was on the election night, so last November, where people were able to set their betting market, which was Trump win. In this case, it would have said Trump win. You'd set the percentage greater than, let's say, 90%. So what a lot of traders did is they set this exact same trade. They set to long Bitcoin, with X amount of money at X amount of leverage. And so when the night actually came, it ends up being very late at night in Europe, very early in the morning in Asia. So there's just people who, they're not going to stay up all night for the results of the U.S. election, right? But they wanted to make trades off it. So we had quite a few people who set that trade, and then when Trump ended up winning, or when the odds increased to the level where it was almost like it wasn't in doubt anymore that he was going to win the election,
Yeah.
we had a ton of trades all activating.
Wow.
And people be able to actually long Bitcoin or long Ethereum or their chosen asset based off of that actual event. So V2 of this in the future, we're not going to be limited by prediction markets. What you'll see is actually just actual real world data plugged into the app. So FOMC decision, CPI data, PPI data, and just basically these types of binary events where it's like it's not necessarily a price level that you really want to activate your trade on. It's more of just the actual triggering of an event or some type of data. So this, as it says, Strategies is getting a revamp. We will be back online soon. So the new version is going to be much more robust. You'll be able to set a strategy just based off of a real world binary event. So again, like any sort of economic data, the Fed or Powell raises rates by 25% versus 50%. You'll be able to, if you only want a long, or if he, lowers rates, if you only want a long a 50%, 50 basis point drop, you're not so sure on a 25 basis point, then, you could set your trade to be able to long or short based off of the results of that data. So something that a lot of people have found really useful and interesting. So hopefully we will have the V2 of that coming up soon.
Yeah, I was going to say that is probably the coolest thing. This prediction markets, that whole world, I think is fascinating to me. And it's like we talk about this a lot in the market talk spaces, but it's like even more of a reason to at least have a bit of an understanding of markets, of technical analysis, of the fundamentals. Like have some level of awareness when you're kind of walking around in these trenches, I guess. Because if you're just going around making bets, you're gonna get slaughtered, dude. Like there are people out here making bets just like you, but they know what they're doing. And that's where I'm like, man, like this world is going to be awesome. But if you take the time to really learn what's going on, you'll have a much better time because you might be winning and you might be up like Flo, chasing the number one trade on the platform right now. That's where you could be aiming to get to.
Right. And the like the cool thing is ultimately with this type of strategy is, again, like just the fact that you're going to be able to do it with everything. So this is one of the like most kind of exciting things. Like I mentioned before, and basically just stay tuned for the kind of like next iteration of it. The only other thing, like besides like kind of just the general onboarding that I think it would be important to highlight is, again, we do have a points program. So points program essentially is based off of three things. So those three things are going to be your actual trading activity. So actually going here into the exchange, executing trades. I can just tell you, like the profit, we're not rewarding you or penalizing you based off of your P&L. So, some people are glad to hear that, right? They're like, oh, that's good. Some people are not glad to hear. They're like, yo, I win all the time. Like, shouldn't I get rewarded for this? But yeah, ultimately it's going to be just kind of like fairly distributed between people by volume for trading activity, and then also for depositing in the vault. So we do have also a liquidity pool where people can basically provide liquidity to the app and to the exchange. And then also on your referral activity. So if we're looking here, right, so just based off of referral. So, again, I do have a referral code inputted here. What that shows is, so this is something we actually added very recently, right? So what I'm getting essentially on this code is a boost based off of my referees volume. So one thing that's a little bit different about this, about this new referral program that we just launched, I believe yesterday actually, or it might actually be today, is that essentially not only do you get a bonus when you refer more people. So when I refer people with my code, not only do I get a bonus for that, right? Which is fairly standard. I refer more volume, therefore I get a higher bonus on the amount of points that I get, right? That's like how most of these systems work. One thing that we added as well is essentially you also get a bonus based off of how much volume your referrer has. So let's say if I'm doing it, I do a ton of volume. I'm doing billions and billions of dollars of volume on Ostium every month. Like basically, if I can share my code and basically anyone who uses my code actually gets a boost as well. So it kind of creates a flywheel where people are incentivized to both trade, use their code, get their own tier up higher, but then as you trade, you get your tier higher, and you refer more people. The people that you refer actually get an extra bonus as well. So the better you do, the better your community, kind of like your referees do, and then they can kind of start their own like referral networks and get a bonus on what they're earning as well. So it's just this flywheel that we've created, where again, unlike most systems where only the referrer, like the person who's doing a lot of volume, referring a lot of people, get a benefit, you using their code actually gets you a larger benefit as well. So there's more details. I think it either might be out on our Twitter page now under as an article, or we'll be announcing more details later today. But essentially, that's the new system we have. Again, open to feedback, suggestions, whether it's on how the system works. Maybe you think that this display is a little bit confusing, and you think you need more clarity. Feel free to drop us a message in Discord or a ticket. DM me directly. It is a new system, so it's totally expected that we'll get questions. So my DMs are open for any sort of walkthroughs, explanations, things like that.
Cool. Oh, I know I had a question the other day from the audience. Someone had asked for when you are making a trade and you close the trade out and say you're up $100, do you automatically, does the money get dropped into your wallet, or is there like a long waiting periods or withdrawal period? Like, how does that work?
So if I were to close this trade, which unfortunately I'm not going to on this stream, where we're almost at 700%, like I'm so close.
Great.
So, but yes, the money, as soon as the trades are settled, depending on how you actually logged on to the website. So one thing I can do is disconnect really quickly. So depending on how you logged on. So if you log on via, just to start out, I'm a convenience guy. Shit, which email do you use? So I generally prefer to use the email login. So if you do use the email login, okay, so yeah, this is a different account. See, I'm forgetting my email here, so maybe I'm in the wrong place. But essentially, the funds will land automatically in your wallet when you close a trade. But then you will have to withdraw. So let me get into the right account here really quickly. Please do not send me a bunch of spam emails because you just saw all my emails. Thank you very much. But essentially, what we would have to do from there. So let's say I close this trade and I had, about $6,000 landed here in my account, which takes about 1 second, after the trade is actually closed. I would just need to go here to withdraw, and you can withdraw to any wallet address. So, choose your amount, enter the wallet address, your Coinbase, your Kraken, your personal wallet, whatever it is.
That's
and
cool.
Press withdraw.
Because sometimes platforms take a while. And you're like, dude,
no, I mean, 1 second. It's about 1 second. Like, so when whether you're depositing or you're withdrawing through the Google or Gmail login, you're going to get your funds in about 1 second.
Okay.
So what we can, let me see if I can do this really quickly. So I've loaded up like a few bucks into my Coinbase so we could show the deposit as well. Let me see if I can just, let me see if it'll allow me here. Okay, so try that there, and then what we can do as well. Sorry, what was your last question? I was kind of got like just into the flow here of doing things.
It was. Oh, it was just around when you're closing a trade, how fast the withdrawal
Okay.
process.
Yeah,
is.
yeah. It's like 1 second. The other method that's again like also if you were to just connect with your wallet. So kind of like a normal process, if you just connect with your wallet instead. Oops. Yeah, I have like random, like a few bucks just like floating around in every wallet, of course, like everybody else. And yeah, so if you were to use your personal wallet, it's actually more direct. So if you were to close the trade here, when you're logged in with your own personal wallet, connecting through MetaMask, connecting through Rabby, whatever, your personal wallet is, the funds when you close the trade are literally just going to land directly in your wallet. There's no need to withdraw. In that same vein, there's no need to deposit either. You're literally just trading with the Arbitrum USDT that you have in your account. So if you're trading with your own personal wallet, I mean, just some alpha here, you can pretty much just ignore the funding options. The best way to actually get funds here into your personal wallet is literally just going into your wallet. So like your MetaMask, and you could you could literally send to your personal wallet or through to a different wallet. If you already have money, it's already there. You don't need to do anything. It seems a lot, like it would be a lot more complicated than it actually is. Personal wallet, funds are always in your wallet. All you have to do is just, send funds to your personal wallet or use funds already in there. The only kind of like two-step process is when you are using the email login. And again, that's just because you're using an email. So we spin up a wallet on the back end.
Right.
And then it's similar to like, if you're used to Hyperliquid, you used to even like some centralized exchanges. At that point, there is an account that you send money to and withdraw money from. But again, it's still all like a 1 second type of process to like get those funds. So I did send here. Okay. So I do have money in my Coinbase account, so I can show like the speed of deposits as well. So let me actually go into a wallet that I use actively. If anybody hacks me, if you guys get access to any of my information, like please don't. I don't know what I'm showing here. It's like I don't know what I'm showing here. My OPSEC is terrible. Obviously, I'm just running you guys through my whole like app experience right now. So please just don't hack me. Thank you.
I appreciate it in advance, everybody.
So the easiest way, I'm here again in my wallet. In my actual smart wallet, my smart account, so the Google login. So what I'll do here is again just open up this account page, which I get just by clicking here on my wallet and my balance. I'm literally just going to copy the wallet address here, using the kind of like standard copy button, and then we can go into here. I've loaded up my Coinbase with a small amount of funds in order to show you, and let's go ahead and send funds. So let's, again, select network, Arbitrum. So again, this is another point that a lot of people really enjoy is free. So if you're sending USDC from like Coinbase, Arbitrum, awesome. It is going to be free.
That is awesome. 23 seconds.
I want that extra 5 cents. Okay, so I will go ahead and send that into this wallet. So it says it actually sends here normally about 23 seconds. We tend to see a lot faster times. Like I've seen it again in like about a second. The most I've ever seen is about a minute, and it kind of just depends on network activity. So if like the chain, we are still on a blockchain. So if the chain experiences really high traffic, sometimes there is like a little bit of latency there, but let's see. Oop. See, this is, I swear I sent like a few $100 off of here like recently, and it did not make me verify. So I feel like it's like the TSA checks, where it's like it's a random check. Like that's how it feels, because I swear that I just sent a bigger amount of money on there, and it gave me like no checks. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so I've sent 25 USDC here to this wallet. Let's see how long it actually takes to hit. In the meantime, everything is still bullish. I'm sure that's exactly what everyone wants to hear. Like charts looking like this was a minor retrace on this last day. Oh shit. Yeah, I absolutely do not want to show you guys that page. That is like oh, so there we go. So I mean, yeah, a few seconds, funds did arrive here in my account, and you see it went from $2 to $27. So yeah, pretty quickly, under a minute, at any time. And then if I wanted to withdraw those funds, so again, just for the sake of the kind of tutorial or the whatever you want to call it, let's see. So again, similarly, you receive USDC again, blockchain friction. So I do have to make sure it's receiving USDC on the Arbitrum network. So again, be very careful about that if you are using this method. But again, so I could go here, withdraw, wallet address, $25. And withdraw successful. So essentially at this point, it can take a minute. So this I will tell you.
A little longer.
You guys just literally saw it. Like, oh no, this was my send. My bad. So it's taking a little bit longer to kind of like register on Coinbase for some reason. But let's just refresh the page and see where we're at.
Yeah, Coinbase oftentimes is a bit slower.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I got the funds faster than it actually showed up in my Coinbase transaction history, so that's something to consider as well.
Very nice. Yeah, wow, that is fast. That's very nice.
Okay. Yeah, it's literally it's showing the funds here in my wallet.
Yeah.
So I've already got the funds here in my wallet. It took less than a minute. So UI, UX of crypto apps aside, the actual speed, that you're able to withdraw, you're able to deposit is let's say anywhere from 1 second to at the longest 1 minute if the blockchain is kind of experiencing some latency issues or something. So either way, a lot faster than you're used to dealing with, like your prime broker, your normal kind of like TradFi trading account, where right now it's still at, I believe, T+2, T+3, so it can take like 2 to 3 business days. I do believe that the TradFi market is slowly moving towards basically T+0, so or T+1 at the very least, where it takes about a day, like maybe a business day. But the advantages of crypto is still instant. So as you would say, atomic settlement instantly. You can have your funds moving instantly across borders, across accounts, et cetera, et cetera. So the benefits of crypto are still very present, even if banks and financial institutions move to like a 1-day settlement. You still, basically having your funds instantly is still one of the primary benefits of crypto, right?
Yeah, most definitely. I think that was the core of crypto, and still will remain to be, and still is. I still notice it when I try and use an ATM or have to pull money out of a bank. I'm like, oh, this is why. This is such a pain. So yeah, great points there. Was going to say, I know we're probably wrapping up soon here, but is there anything else on the Ostium platform we should run through, or anything else that kind of comes to mind for like your trading style or things that you want to pull up that you think might be interesting?
I mean, again, to be quite honest, it's very, very simple. I'm mostly just keeping it like just kind of just a explanatory version. Is just I'm very much just keyed into kind of like economic data, economic events. Whether it's CPI, PPI. We have ADP this morning. I take a deep look into a lot of this data, not just looking at the headlines. So just for example, just literally from scrolling Twitter and then kind of like taking a look in, deeper myself, what you'll notice is there's a huge divergence between like ADP data, like jobs data, and BLS data. The biggest drop in employment that was shown today on this ADP report was in healthcare services, essentially. But it doesn't show up on other BLS like jobs data. There's just huge divergence where ADP data shows a large downtick in employment in that sector, but the BLS data actually shows a steady uptick. Like, so it's a steady uptrend in employment in that data. So it's like you kind of have to look at the data, how it's calculated, and in order to kind of like get a real picture of how things are doing. And essentially, like I said, my thesis is what's bullish for America. What's bullish actually is bullish for Bitcoin. More unpopular takes or hot takes, but I mean, if you look at who owns Bitcoin, who owns crypto, I mean, it's Americans, it's American individuals, it's American institutions, companies. I mean, whether people like it or not, I mean, look at USDC, look at how many billions of dollars in US denominated just stable coins are. Not, I mean, everything else is denominated in dollars primarily too, but look at how the primacy of USD stable coins. Like it or not, crypto is a US market at this point. So essentially, I'm looking at US economic data. I'm looking at basically the direction of federal funds rate, all of this different types of things to build my thesis around whether to be bullish or bearish. And then why my mentors actually taught me is just never trade against your macro, right? So if I'm looking at macro and I'm like, this is bullish, then what am I always looking for? Bullish setups. So same thing. Why was I thinking that we weren't going to just go straight to zero, right? Like why was I looking for these kind of key levels to buy? Is because ultimately there's positioning, and then there's actual macro, there's actual like the trend that you're going. So again, based off of positioning, like based off of the chart, it was very likely that we could dip back down to this level, and there's a very clear like support here. So knowing that macro is bullish, I'm not looking to short. I'm not looking here like, oh, like when it breaks this level, I'm going to short it to zero, because ultimately, again, my bias is bullish. So what I'm looking for is, as soon as it starts to consolidate around these key levels, I'm going to buy, with a fairly tight stop. But that's my buy signal. So it's like that's the biggest advice, like, or the best advice, like best like alpha as far as trading goes for people, I think, is that there's a lot of people out there who have a bias, like they're like the market's bullish or the market's bearish, but then their trades don't necessarily reflect that. They're like, oh, the market's bullish, but I think it's going to go down here, so I'm going to short it. Where the smarter move is much more to be like, I'm bullish, so I'm going to buy it at this level. It's, if you have a bearish bias, go ahead and play that. But like if your bias is bullish, take bullish setups. If your bias is bearish, take bearish setups. Like don't trade against your macro. It's just like you essentially have like two competing like people, two competing voices up in your head. That's just going to lead to a lot of analysis paralysis and confusion. If you're wrong, you're wrong, right? Like if I have a bullish bias and I'm saying I'm going to buy here, this is my key level, I'm going to buy because I think the setup is bullish. I mean, I'm open to be wrong. That's why I have the stop. Under here, I would have waited for another retest, and break above that level, right? But until then, I literally am not taking short trades. So there's some people who can be very dynamic. You're longing, you're shorting, you're killing it on both sides. I will say that being a trader for many years, the number of people who can actually do that is extremely small. It's better to somewhat build like a position, build a bias, and trade based off that, in my experience, as opposed to like kind of like just switching every time on like very low time frames. Because I mean, even if I'm working on the 15-minute, what am I looking for here? Like, I'm looking for divergences, bullish divergences, breaking back above key levels. But I was, just to be quite honest with you, because of my bullish bias that's been built up over the last couple months, at no point was I looking for here and like, okay, if this breaks, I'm gonna go short. Like I would have got destroyed, and for good reason, because ultimately the trend, the trend on a macro level is still very much up. Whether you can say we're getting lower highs or lower lows here. I mean, ultimately, where the trend doesn't start there, right? Like the trend starts here. Like we're still very, very, very much so. Like I'm even amazing myself here, because I hadn't looked at this in a long time. But it's like the trend is up. So until something changes, like fundamentally on a macro level, I'm absolutely at any given time looking for longs. Like, not a gloating point, but like just a point of fact. I longed 50K here. I didn't long the bottom here. I'll be honest with you. I longed like around 80K here. And again, like I was longing around 98.5K here. Like there's no reason, if you're bullish, to like look at these setups and be like, okay, I'm going to short it. So
Yeah.
that is literally my biggest piece of alpha for any new trader is like, if you're bullish on Bitcoin, like don't try to short it. If you're bullish on ETH, don't try to short it. Like let your bias form, like look at the data and then make your trades on lower timeframes informed by that data.
I like that advice. That's good stuff right there. Way higher chance of getting a lucky move too, or a lucky big break, some kind of breaking news, a massive shot, and it gets you some nice gains there. Yeah, definitely.
For my trading style, especially high leverage, high stakes. You know, I basically like at any given one of these points, if you would have tried to short where like a normal, if you were in a bearish trend, you might have shorted like on the retests. Like, yeah, you just would have gotten wrecked. So yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at.
Makes sense. Right on, dude. Well, I think it's a pretty solid stream. I think for a lot of people, especially if you're in the spaces, got a bit more of a in-depth look into Flo's sort of mindset and the way he thinks about the market. So, but this is pretty cool, and I definitely learned a lot. So, Flo, I appreciate you coming on and showing us a little bit of the ropes of Ostium, as well as sort of how you look at the markets and approach everything. Is there anything that you've got coming up, by the way, or that Ostium has coming up on your personal side or the professional side that you thought might be worth letting people know about before we wrap?
Yeah, just want to say, again, glad to be here. For people who are looking for more of like a technical breakdown, maybe what I do, I apologize. I am a high leverage vibes trader.
High leverage vibes trader.
But yeah, I mean, I'd love to do another one of these streams again. Maybe, I should have been more prepared, but maybe with a little bit more preparation. There are a couple other things that I look at that, on the spot, it's a little bit harder to pull up that I can show people next time. But yeah, it was great to be here. I'm enjoying starting to come on to these podcasts and these streams, and looking forward to the next spaces and then or the next stream we do.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I had a great time, and I appreciate you coming through. And everyone who's watching back at home, please give them a follow Ostium, check them out. If you're on X, you can follow them right above our faces. You can find Ostium's stuff down below in the tweet below, and if you're on YouTube, down below in the description, you can find everything. We'll catch you guys all in the next stream or the next space. Take care, everybody.